What day is it now? Like a star on a moonlit river, my life graced by an element simple as water. I move with love and care where old meanings grow full and others lose their hold. Slowly, I release myself from corridors of used and vacant buildings. I release myself. The jailer, shuffling his feet and jingling some keys, walks farther and farther away, then disappears. As though we had made an agreement, I turn and walk away. I've wanted to do this all my life.
I'm back home thinking of the beauty of this life, thinking of our oranges and thinking of the swallows here who give me so much and never ask for anything from me. It is dark now, tide slowly changing, the swallows asleep. Inside my shack, I hear mice in the walls and remember the winter of '74. My neighbor Daniel was fed up with them and finally started running around with them with an axe in his hand, laughing. And so he bought a mousetrap and shared it with me. It cost $11, a better mousetrap, and it works like this. It's a galvanized box with a galvanized mouse-sized tunnel running through the box about an inch off the floor. Required no bait. You set the box anywhere, an inch or so from the wall, or on a food shelf, and they go in the tunnel and step on a trap door which spanks them into the jailhouse at the other end of the box. The trap door automatically, by wind-up spring, sets itself again, and reportedly up to 15 mice can be jailed in one single evening. They make racket like prisoners, but if you put cheese and crackers and a thimble full of wine in the corner, they settle down for the night and you can get some sleep. The mousetrap manufacturing company doesn't tell you what to do with the mice. On the river, after breakfast, I row them across to the other shore, where there's an old falling down fisherman's shack in the willows. It has a rusty bed and mattress and an old beyond rescue cook stove. There they are released in what we call Heartbreak Hotel. Outside their back door, through the willows, out there in the cattails and old driftwood, is everything a mouse could want. They might miss the Cockerline, home-baked Cockerline wheat bread. They might miss licking the honey out of the bottom of my tea bowl, but I won't miss the turds in the morning. Besides, it's samsara, isn't it? Just as the sages tell us. The mice are back sooner than you know it, tiptoeing on the 2x4s.
Art said he considered Robert to be one of the most moral persons that he knew. And that was a pretty high compliment at the time. Morals were sort of self-defined in the 60s, counterculture. And I think over the years I came to appreciate what that meant with Robert, and that he honored his friendships, he honored his being on the earth. He was dedicated to a life of joy.
The river glides in silence. The night is deep, like a loving mother. A silence goes back and forth through the marsh. The same silence that was here in my shack, waiting for me. It was always here. I was gone so long, now the silence is so much deeper, and I sink down into it. The sadness I met in the world falls away from me. One by one, my dreams return. Everything good I put into my house is here, living in the silence. Boards placed a certain way, a window facing the moon, a straight-back chair at the table, gifts received, and pottery bowls and cups I made with my own hands. Things crude and useful that began from enthusiasm and keep that life and give it back. Talismans and pieces of string. In the night silence, my house begins to speak to me. It leaves me alone a long time, but then it reaches out. A gentle hand penetrates my body. Through the flesh, it reaches in, and on one rib below my heart leaves hanging a small silver box with all my good dreams inside it. Nothing can ever be taken from you now.
One day, I think it was after work, I was coming home and he was literally standing outside of the apartments on the gravel. He had just been evicted out of his apartment. And Kirby Johnson, his landlord, had let him live there a month behind, pay a little bit, and I think he was like 5 or 6 or 7 months behind in rent. And Kirby said that's about as much as I can extend you. You need to find another place.
He had an air about him where he was above really being in debt, but he knew he was. He knew that I knew that he owed me some money, and we just let it go at that. In the end, I got some, and I forgave him quite a bit.
Robert came walking down the street and asked about that little shack because he had heard it was vacant, and so we let him move in. My husband Bob used to tease Robert that the place was going to make the cover of Shack Beautiful.
I said, Robert, where does this faith come from that you have that everything's going to be okay, you're going to be taken care of, you never worry about where the next meal's coming from? And he said, Arthur, it's like living in the hand of God.
A bee thumps against the dusty window, falls to the sill, climbs back up, buzzing, falls to the sill, and does this over and over. If only he would climb higher. The top half of the window is open.
Robert didn't so much as read a poem as become that poem.
And I said, well, I'm writing all the time, Clyde, but it's changing. And I said, I really don't know whether it's poetry or not. And Clyde said, oh, that's the beginning of style.
He was amazing on his voice, and he could make a grocery list sound like poetry, you know. And he had that wonderful lyric baritone singing voice too.
This is called Spring Poem in the Skagit Valley. The birds are going the other way now, passing houses as they go, and birds fly back and forth across the valley, getting ready, and geese fly back and forth. The sound of geese in the distance is wonderful. In our minds, we rise up and move on.
The curtain pulls back, he delivers, and the curtain closes. And you can't do better than that.
There's a little poem by Dogen, 1200. It's called On the Nature of the True Dharma Eye. 3 lines. Midnight, no waves, no wind. The empty boat is flooded with moonlight.
Robert was my inspiration to move back to the simple life on Skagit River. And because of that, I was able to be spiritually healthy.
He was this being, this almost luminous being that brought us all into his light and his fold. A lot of times at Shai Shai, the summer I spent out there, we'd never see him. You know, he'd get up 1 or 2 o'clock, and he'd kind of have tea and stuff, and he'd be up all night. I mean, I met him, and he was living in a dark basement, and seemed to prefer the dark, small spaces with the candle illumination.
You walk in, and there's a calligraphy or painting table, and then there's a place to sit where you look out and you can just see the tide, you can watch the moon, and for me, it just gave this perfect mantra of daily activities. And he did the same thing in the lumberyard when he built the cabin in Anacortes. It was the same thing, that kind of thoughtfulness for almost every inch of the place.
The first time we met him, he took us out. It was a moonlit night when we went to his house, and he had this little patch of dirt, and he had 2 little zucchinis that had sprouted up, maybe about 1 inch high, and he was watering them with a cup under the moon.
Robert could just take a bunch of boards and create a place and a space that you wanted to spend time and have tea with him.
I think everything was a ceremony with him. He would spend time arranging his pens, just so. He would spend time arranging his dirty dishes, just so, before he'd wash them.
A few people, and I was one, got to go out to the Shai Shai and see him. And he had built that beautiful place by hauling all these planks that had washed up, gotten loose off a barge or something, these wonderful planks, 2x12s, I think. And he put that thing together as if the wind had just blown the thing up like this, and it was perfect.
All artists are instruments. If you allow yourself to be an instrument, and you believe in the Creator, and if you believe in your ancestors, you can be an instrument.
Just before sleep, I dream of my grandfather returned to his farm in the early spring, where he stands halfway out in the field, still as a tree. He doesn't see me watching from under a fence-lined cedar. His old clothes weigh heavy on him. His eyes are hatching something new for the one big field that always worked him hardest. Is he thinking, tractors, not horses, now? For in this field he liked to tromp lopsided in a furrow behind his horses, the best team of whites in Grays Harbor County plowing. Where the drainage ditch once ran, before its cedar casings rotted, a trace of red in the mud, water lies on the grass, draining off so slow the lightest grasses do not budge. He knows everything there is waiting to do. When I slip through the fence, bend low over a wire, a staple pulls out of a post, leaving two dark eyes in the wood. The wire goes limp without a noise. Alder saplings no bigger than switches have come into the field a year before me, fervent with new leaves. Standing in the shadow he casts, I am close enough to touch or speak to him, but no word comes right enough. In a corner of the woodshed near the house, patches of powdery mold are spreading over his work shoes.
A 1,000 years ago, someone prayed for the rain that is falling today. If I knew who it was, I would turn now and call back to tell them, it's raining. To that one far back in the darkness of time, I would say, come, look in my garden. I planted squash. Sturdy old blossoms, enough light in them to carry us both through the dark.
One of the things that Robert said in one of his poems that has helped me so much and given me a lot of hope when sometimes things have been a little rough, and it's the line, the little bird that is going to heal me is hopping around in the bushes.
My father. In America, history goes by quickly. There's a windstorm, and Finland is a coat flattened against my father like newspaper caught in blackberry. I think of his grave in the small cemetery outside Elma. Name and dates carved in the headstone. I remember the day he was buried by greedy men, and the day before, my mother, my brother and his wife, and I, upstairs in Whiteside's funeral parlor. Followed by the undertaker, we walked across a lavender carpet while the pastel lights sent cheap violins weeping through the air, trying to break us between the rows of luxurious coffins. My mother said, and almost laughed, shopping for a coffin, before she fell apart, crying in my arms, trembling into her widowhood. I said, Dad hated this. Let's not let them beat him at the last. And so, that day, we chose the cheapest coffin this country can make. I watched the undertaker wilt into his lavender economy and try to smile, and my father grew joyful inside me. Back out on the street, my brother jammed the car into second gear, roaring, "This country has gone to hell." In the back seat, our mother sat quaking and holding behind a handkerchief her destroyed mouth. Over the craggy ridges of the handkerchief, her eyes burned shut and cracked like ashes in the rain.
After so long, after a long time, the well opens. Friends pour their fresh water upon us. water of depths for which no words exist yet, only that there does come this flowing and this feeling. When I'm a long way down, seeing and not seeing, all wound up together in a tangle, and can't make anything work. One day, 2 strong brothers come to my side. Suddenly, the healing waters flow fresh and clear, and just as suddenly, they are gone, and I sit alone in the early sunset afterglow. I'm inside a new body. I'm jumping again, full of love. Not for anything, but it lights up the man in the blue shirt, where he sits by the table, pen in hand, all things embracing again. At the end of my life, I will lie down in a little boat and float out on the sea of these friendships.
Like a boat drifting, sleep flows forward on the deep water of dreams. Drifts and drifts until finally the bottom falls out of knowledge. In the fragrant mist of dawn, the rower wakes, picks up the oars, sets them, and begins to row. All night he labored in his dream to be born like a song in the mouth of God.
O jungfrun i Gottkällan, hon skulle hämta